Thank you so much for having us. It's always fun to do these Google things. It's always particular fun for me when I'm out at Mountain View because my little boy, who is not actually a little boy, he's like 6'2" and 30. But in my head, he's my little boy, is actually one of you, which is terrifying. Right, we figured out the running order and tossed dice to see who goes first, and it's me. So I'm going to begin with a poem. And it's about an awful lot of things. I love the fact that this poem is now, people send me messages on Twitter saying that they read it at weddings, and other people seem to regard it as a poem about upset and ignorance, and I think probably it's about a lot of things, including getting off your phone sometime. But it's called The Day the Saucers Came. That day, the saucers landed, hundreds of them, golden, silent, coming down from the sky like great snowflakes, and the people of Earth stood and stared as they descended, waiting, dry-mouthed, to find what waited inside for us, and none of us knowing if we would be here tomorrow. But you didn't notice it, because that day, the day the saucers came, by some coincidence was the day that the graves gave up their dead, and the zombies pushed up through soft earth or erupted, shambling and dull-eyed, unstoppable, came towards us, the living, and we screamed and ran. But you did not notice this, because on the saucer day, which was the zombie day, it was Ragnarok also. And the television screens showed us a ship built of dead men's nails, a serpent, a wolf, all bigger than the mind could hold, and the cameraman could not get far enough away, and then the gods came out. But you did not see them coming, because on the saucer zombie battling God's day, the floodgates broke, and each of us was engulfed by genies and sprites offering us wishes and wonders and eternities, and charm and cleverness and true brave hearts and pots of gold, while giants fee-fo-fummed across the land and killer bees. But you had no idea of any of this, because that day, the saucer day, the zombie day, the Ragnarok and fairies day, the day the great winds came and snows and the cities turned to crystal, the day all plants died, plastics dissolved, the day the computers turned, the screens telling us we would obey, the day angels, drunk and muddled, stumbled from the bars and all the bells of London were sounded, the day animals spoke to us in Assyrian, the Yeti day, the fluttering capes and arrival of the time machine day. You didn't notice any of this, because you were sitting in your room, not doing anything, not even reading, not really, just looking at your telephone, wondering if I was going to call. So the next thing that's going to happen is Amanda's going to play a song.
Yeah, and you should intro it, but we should tell them about the recording and why this all happened, maybe. Or should we just not bother with that? We made a record, kind of by accident. We went on a tour and decided to record it, and that's what this record is. And
yeah, there is a record called An Evening with Neil Gaiman and Amanda Palmer. 3 discs, one of me, one of her, one of us. And this is a song that's actually on the Us one, because on the record I sing it, but Amanda's going to be singing it now because she has a much prettier voice than I do.
I think your voice is beautiful.
And it's and it was a song that actually is kind of relevant to everybody here, and it began when I started thinking about torch songs, because classic torch songs are basically conversations that you have with a bartender at 3 o'clock in the morning, smoking a cigarette, not wanting to go home, with your heart broken. And I thought, that doesn't happen anymore. you can't smoke in bars. And if your heart is broken, you're not going to be in a bar at 3 o'clock in the morning. You're going to be doing something else entirely.
I Google you late at night when I don't know what to do. I've seen photos you've forgotten you were in, put up by your friends. I Google you when the day is done and everything is through. I read that journal that you kept that month in France. I've watched you dance. And I'm pleased your name is practically unique. It's only you and a would-be PhD from Chesapeake who writes papers on the structure of the sun. I've read each one. I know that I should let you fade, but there's that box, and there's your name. Somehow it never makes the pain grow less or fade or disappear. I know that I should save my soul, and I should crawl back in my hole, but it's too easy just to fold and type your name again. I fear I Google you whenever I'm alone and feeling blue. And each scrap of information that I gather says you found somebody new. And it really shouldn't matter. Ought to blow up my computer, but instead I Google you. Thank you. So that song was actually written by Neil, and I heard it in the best way. It was the first week that we actually met and hung out. We weren't dating yet. This was like 5 years ago, and he came to stay at my house for a week while we were working on this book project together. And I don't remember how it came up, but we started chatting, and he mentioned that he'd written a song for a cabaret singer to sing. And I said, well, just sing it for me. And he went, I can't sing. And then he opened his mouth and just sang it a cappella. And I couldn't believe what a beautiful voice he had. And he's a pretty clever writer, too. Anyway, so I put some chords under it, and that was sort of like our first weird little thing that we did together. And I'm going to play you one of mine now, and then Neil's going to read I was trying to think. I was thinking about maybe taking requests from you guys, but I thought that might just get really weird. Because also I'm only going to play one song, and so I was just standing back there wondering what would actually work. And there's a song I was practicing for the show tonight that I think would be good. It might be a little sloppy, but it's on the record, so I thought that would be relevant. And it's a song that I wrote a couple years ago. About all these journalists asking me who my influences are. And especially, like, I get asked a lot, who are your female influences? And I realized I'd been thinking about it really narrowly. Because, like, and especially, the more you give the answer to the question, you're like, okay, well, Laurie Anderson and Madonna and all this shit that I listened to when I was a kid. And, and you start just having a fucking, laundry list of people. And it occurred to me, actually, in the middle of the night one night, that I was leaving out this giant one, and it struck me as actually so important, I decided to write a song about it. So this is it. People keep asking me why I do things like I do. And in all of this measuring influence, I forgot you. You and me hiding behind the Mohegan Hotel. You told me things that nobody around me would tell. That was the summer that everyone touched me at once. It was like one day they ignored me, and the next they were all down my pants. Bed with me safe before anyone else. You opened beside me and held me when I needed help. You and me lying together at night in my been inside me forever. Judy Blume. I couldn't carry a tune, but I thought I could sing. And no one had told me our thoughts were a good or bad thing. But I started noticing grown-ups would smile and cringe. And you taught me that you could say anything you could think. I don't remember my friends from gymnastics class, but I remember when Deanie was at the school dance, Buddy feeling her up in the locker room, Margaret bored counting hats in the synagogue, Davy was stirring the tea that she wouldn't drink, Tony was watching his so-called friend shoplifting. All of them lived in my head, quietly whispering, "You are not so strange." details of 7th grade. All I remember is lying and being afraid. But I can't forget Catherine and Michael going all the way. Steph on the scale in the bathroom alone that day. Karen pretending to puke so her dad would stay. Margaret arguing with God while she masturbated. All of them stacked on my shelf like a love letter. All of them saying, Amanda, you know better. You are not to blame. This world's a vicious place. So go on and think what you want. You will not be alone with your thoughts. Well, you will, but you won't in a way, 'cause a girl thought it too in a book that the library bought. People will keep asking me why I do things like I do. And from now on, I'll tell them The Cure, and I'll talk about you. Judy, I can't believe sometimes that I'm an adult. And that girls like I was think that I have this shit figured out. You and me lying together at night in my room. You'll be inside them forever. Judy Blume.
So at the beginning of this year, I tried an experiment with BlackBerry sponsoring me. I went to Twitter, threw out 12 questions on Twitter, and got hundreds and thousands of replies back. And then picked 12 replies pretty much at random, and used them as yogurt starter for 12 short stories, one for each month of the year, and I made a calendar of tales. And this is last month's tale. That feels good, I said, and I stretched my neck to get out the last of the cramp. It didn't just feel good, it felt great, actually. I'd been squashed up inside that lamp for so long. You start to think that nobody's ever going to rub it again. You're a genie, said the young lady with the polishing cloth in her hand. I am. You're a smart girl, toots. What gave me away? The arriving in a puff of smoke, she said, and you look like a genie. You've got the turban and the pointy shoes. I folded my arms and blinked. Now I was wearing blue jeans, grey sneakers, and a faded grey sweater, the male uniform of this time and this place. I raised my hand to my forehead, and I bowed deeply. I am the genie of the lamp, I told her. Rejoice, O fortunate one. I have it in my power to grant you 3 wishes, and don't try the I wish for more wishes thing. I won't play and you'll lose a wish. Right, go for it. I folded my arms again. No, she said, I mean, thanks and all that, but it's fine, I'm good. Honey, I said, toots, sweetie, perhaps you misheard me. I'm a genie, and the 3 wishes. We're talking anything you want. You ever dreamed of flying? I can give you wings. You want to be wealthy, richer than Croesus. You want power, say it. 3 wishes, whatever you want. Like I said, she said, thanks, I'm fine. Would you like something to drink? You must be parched after spending so much time in that lamp. A wine, water, tea? Actually, now she came to mention it, I was thirsty. Do you have any mint tea? She made me some mint tea in a teapot that was almost a twin to the lamp in which I'd spent the greater part of the last 1,000 years. Thank you for the tea. No problem. But I don't get it. Everyone I've ever met, they start asking for things. A fancy house, a harem of gorgeous women. Not that you'd want that, of course. I might, she said. You can't just make assumptions about people. Oh, and don't call me Toots or Sweetie or any of those things. My name's Hazel. Ah, I understood. You want a beautiful woman then. My apologies. You have but to wish. I folded my arms. No, she said, I'm good. No wishes. How's the tea? I told her that the mint tea was the finest I had ever tasted. She asked me when I'd started feeling a need to grant people's wishes and whether I felt a desperate need to please. She asked about my mother, and I told her that she could not judge me as she would judge mortals, for I was a djinn, powerful and wise, magical and mysterious. She asked me if I liked hummus, and when I said that I did, she toasted a pita bread and sliced it up for me to dip into the hummus. I dipped my bread slices into the hummus and ate it with delight. The hummus gave me an idea. Just make a wish, I said helpfully, and I could have a meal fit for a sultan brought in to you. Each dish would be finer than the one before and all served upon golden plates. And you could keep the plates afterwards. It's good, she said with a smile. Would you like to go for a walk? We walked together through the town. It felt good to stretch my legs after so many years in the lamp. We wound up in a public park, sitting on a bench by a lake. It was warm but gusty, and the autumn leaves fell in flurries each time the wind blew. I told Hazel about my youth as a djinn, of how we used to eavesdrop on the angels and how they would throw comets at us if they spied us listening. I told her of the bad days of the djinn wars and how King Suleiman had imprisoned us inside hollow objects, bottles, lamps, clay pots, that kind of thing. She told me of her parents, who were both killed in the same plane crash and who'd left her the house. She told me of her job, illustrating children's books, a job she'd backed into accidentally at the point she realized she would never be a really competent medical illustrator, and of how happy she became whenever she was sent a new book to illustrate. She told me she taught life drawing to adults at the local community college 1 evening a week. I saw no obvious flaw in her life, no hole she could fill by wishing save one. Your life is good, I told her, but you have no one to share it with. Wish, and I will bring you the perfect man or woman, a film star, a rich person. No need, I'm good, she said. We walked back to her house, past houses dressed for Halloween. This is not right, I told her. People always want things. Not me. I've got everything I need. Then what do I do? She thought for a moment. Then she pointed at her front yard. Can you rake the leaves? Is that your wish? Nope, just something you could do while I'm getting our dinner ready. I raked the leaves into a heap by the hedge to stop the wind from blowing it apart. After dinner, I washed up the dishes. I spent the night in Hazel's spare bedroom. It wasn't that she didn't want help. She let me help. I ran errands for her, picked up art supplies and groceries. On days she'd been painting for a long time, she let me rub her neck and shoulders. I have good, firm hands. Shortly before Thanksgiving, I moved out of the spare bedroom, across the hall, into the main bedroom, and Hazel's bed. I watched her face this morning as she slept. I stared at the shapes her lips make when she sleeps. The creeping sunlight touched her face, and she opened her eyes and stared at me, and she smiled. You know what I never asked, she said, is what about you? What would you wish for if I asked what your 3 wishes were? I thought for a moment. I put my arm around her, and she snuggled her head into my shoulder. It's okay, I told her. I'm good.
So one last tune for you guys, and then we'll do questions and talking and stuff. And this is also all the stuff we've done here today is actually on the record, isn't it? Oh no, except for the Calendar of Tales. Yeah, but everything else is. And so as you can see, I play the piano and the ukulele. The ukulele not really as good as the piano. I'm a real fan recently of. Well, it's not a new idea, but I think it's great to play an instrument that you're shitty at. It's very liberating. This is sort of a song about that, and it's called the Ukulele Anthem. Sid Vicious played a 4-string Fender bass guitar and couldn't sing, and everybody hated him except the ones who loved him. A ukulele has 4 strings, but Sid did not play ukulele. He did smack and probably killed his girlfriend Nancy Spungen. If only Sid had had a ukulele, maybe Sid would have been happy. Maybe Sid would not have suffered such a sad end. He maybe would have not done all that heroin. Instead, he maybe would have sat around just singing nice songs to his girlfriend. So play your favorite cover song, especially if the words are wrong. 'Cause even if your grades are bad, it doesn't mean you're failing. Do your homework with a fork and eat your Fruit Loops in the dark, and bring your Etch-a-Sketch to work and play your ukulele. Ukulele small and fearful, ukulele brave and peaceful. You can play the ukulele too, it is painfully simple. Play your ukulele badly, play your ukulele loudly. Ukulele banish evil, ukulele save the people. Ukulele gleaming golden from the top of every steeple. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks, then gave her father 41. It left a tragic puzzle. If only they had given her an instrument, those Puritans had lost the plot completely. See what happens when you muzzle a person's creativity and do not let them sing or scream. And nowadays it's worse, 'cause kids have automatic handguns. It takes about an hour to teach someone to play the ukulele, about the same to teach someone to build a standard pipe bomb. You do the math. So play your favorite cover song, especially if the words are wrong. 'Cause even if your grades are bad, it doesn't mean you're failing. Do your homework with a fork and eat your Fruit Loops in the dark, and bring your flask of Jack to work and play your ukulele. Ukulele, thing of wonder, ukulele, wand of thunder. You can play the ukulele too, in London and down under. Play NSYNC or play Jacques Brel and Eminem and Neutral Milko. Tell the children, crush the hatred. Play your ukulele naked. If anybody tries to steal your ukulele, let them take it. Imagine there's no music. Imagine there are no songs. Imagine that John Lennon wasn't shot in front of his apartment. Now imagine if John Lennon had composed Imagine for the ukulele. Maybe people would have truly got the message. You may think my approach is simple-minded and naive, like if you want to change the world, then why not quit and feed the hungry? But people for millennia have needed music to survive, and that is why I've promised John that I will not feel guilty. So play your favorite Beatles song and make the subway fall in love. They're only $19.95, that isn't lots of money. Play until the sun comes up and play until your fingers suffer. Play LCD sound system songs on your ukulele. Quit the bitching on your blog, and stop pretending art is hard. Just limit yourself to 3 chords and do not practice daily. You'll minimize some stranger's sadness with a piece of wood and plastic. Holy fuck, it's so fantastic. Playing ukulele. Eat your homework with a fork and do your Fruit Loops in the dark, and bring your Etch-a-Sketch to work. Your flask of Jack, your vibrator, your fear of heights, your Nikon lens, your mom and dad, your disco stick, your soundtrack to Karate Kid, your Ginsu knives, your rosary, your new Rebecca Black CD, your favorite room, your Bowie knife, your stuffed giraffe, your new glass eye, your sousaphone, your breakfast tea, your Nick Drake tapes, your giving tree, your ice cream truck, your missing wife, your will to live, your urge to cry. Remember, we're all gonna die. So play your ukulele.
So let's talk a little bit about these shows you're playing, and these shows that you've recorded onto this evening with record. Is it more interesting for you guys to combine your work or to combine your audiences?
Actually, the reason why we did them was a little bit of both. We wound up with, we never get free time. We're both strangely busy people. But in 2011, we suddenly found ourselves with 11 days where we had to start out in LA and we had to finish in Seattle, and we didn't have anything to do, and it was amazing. And so immediately we decided to fill it by hiring a car and just driving up the West Coast, and we thought, well, we'll have a vacation, and then we thought, well, if we're going to have a vacation, we'll get on each other's nerves by day 2, so we need something to do. And so that was the idea of taking little theaters as we went and just doing an evening with. And that, of course, embiggened ridiculously very, very quickly. But what became fun was the mingling the audiences. It was like a wedding. It was like that sort of, are you on the bride's side or the groom's side things, that And we'd meet people afterwards at the signings. And we'd hang around and say hello, and there would be people who would just ignore me completely, head over to Amanda with their Dresden Dolls CDs, then there'd be people who'd ignore her and come over to me with their Sandmans, and then there'd be the people who'd just come out and go, can't believe you two, my favorite writer. Like, oh, this is just the best. And
given that you've both constructed these lives that sort of enable you to do whatever you want, whenever you want, it's the remarkable thing about it. What is it that these shows have enabled you to do, have brought out, that's different than any other forum?
That's a good question. It's fresh in my mind right now. We did a Reddit was that 2 days ago? Yeah, 2 days ago. Thanks. Yes. We did a Reddit
several years ago and out of internet time, but
and someone asked, I've been talking a lot publicly nowadays and writing a lot about internet nastiness. And it's actually, it's a hot topic in general, not because I think there's necessarily particularly any more of it today than there was last week or last year, but it seems to be, it's so pervasive that people seem to be trying to figure out, like, okay, well, clearly it's not going away. How the fuck do we deal with it, especially as artists and as women or whatever? And we talked on Reddit about, how Neil and I had our own particular relationship with our fans and with our haters before we met each other. And then we sort of inherited new forms of hate.
They're still making new forms of hate.
But that was also, I think maybe subconsciously, it was also a way of like going out in public and saying like, we're two people who are going to do things together, And in a way, kind of like the wedding, it was like, you guys are going to have to meet my husband. He's a really, really nice guy, and vice versa. And I wanted them to see him. I wanted them to know him.
It was really interesting, I think, for us also, because we have both been, getting up on stages in front of audiences, doing the thing that we do for years and years and years. And if there's one thing that we are both completely certain of, it is that the buck stops with us, with each individual. If it's my reading or whatever, anyone else can have input, but I'm the one that gets to decide what I read, what happens, and Amanda gigging, it all ends up with her. And so you suddenly have these two people who are completely used to being the last authority when things would be, questions could be raised, ideas could be had, but finally it would get to me or get to Amanda, and we'd say, well, actually, we'll do it like this. And suddenly we get to the point where Amanda would say, well, we're going to do it like this. And I say, no, we're not. Or vice versa. And
oh my God, it's like being married.
It was the most sort of married bumping into each other. And I think it taught both of us humility, especially me. And
both of us.
And actually taught us, to cooperate in ways that I think it was nice. It was like a pressure cooker. Because it was the one area of our lives in which we were both reigned supreme. And suddenly we had to give that up.
Yeah, and also, I had a chip on my shoulder maybe about, I'm the stage person. So, I even thought that, maybe, when we would get into these arguments about, the chair should go here, the chair should go there.
We had those arguments.
We did have those arguments. I sort of, that's one of the weird things about being married to an artist or, a person who is used to doing, big public events or whatever, is that, I felt like the expert and Neil felt like the expert, and we would sort of be there going but. And, but it is actually, you could look at so many parts of the tour and the recording and the decisions as a total marriage metaphor, because a lot of it was actually not the arguments we would get into, but just how we would actually smooth things out and not actually get angry at each other and kind of learn how to do the dance.
Even doing the Kickstarter video, when we decided we were actually going to do this properly, we suddenly went, well, we might as well record it. And if we're going to record it, we may as well record it properly, and why not go to Kickstarter? This was in the relatively early days of Kickstarter. So we tried recording a serious video in which we explained what we were doing and why we needed the money and stuff like that. And we did that about 3 or 4 times, and all we knew is that by the end of it, we hated it and each other.
And Neil had a terrible cold.
Well, no, but then time was running out, and then we had to do one suddenly. We realized it was our only chance together, and I'd lost my voice, and had this horrible cold and was sick, and we were in Brighton where Amanda was about to do a gig, so I grabbed a banana from the dressing room. We walked down onto the beach, and Amanda explained to the world what we were going to do in this Kickstarter while I ate a banana.
It was perfect.
And I think
it was a performance art Kickstarter video.
As Kickstarter videos, it was the best.
And also very much in keeping with our stage personas, which is he's really good at being the straight guy, and I'm the obnoxious, ridiculous one, and it's we sort of balance each other.
I like to think of it as English and American.
Ow! Ow!
All right, we're on coming off the ropes from that one. I inevitably will want to come back to the Kickstarter stuff, but I want to talk a little bit ask you a little bit about these modes of creativity. And I guess Neil, even within recent months, there's been the novel, the comic book, the Twitter stories, all of these different mechanisms or constructions that you use to get these stories out in the world. How do you determine, and when do you determine, what goes where? What idea is then going to manifest in which way?
A lot of the times, I have a vague idea going into it. Sometimes the medium actually defines what goes into it a lot of the time. A lot of the time I'm wrong. I had 2 actual books come out this year. The Ocean at the End of the Lane and Fortunately the Milk, my children's book. And both of them started off as something else. Ocean at the End of the Lane was a short story that I was writing to send Amanda when she was recording Theatre is Evil, because I missed her. And I thought, I'll send her a short story. It'll show her I love her. She'll be impressed. Better than flowers. And except that it just kept going. And by the time I finished it, she'd returned from Australia, was mixing the album in Dallas, and I did a word count and discovered I'd written a novel accidentally. Fortunately, The Milk started out in my head as a picture book. And I just started writing it. And I was writing it in a notebook. And whenever I sort of felt like I needed cheering up, I'd go to the notebook and I'd write about 1,000 words of Fortunately the Milk, and it would make me smile. And then I'd put it away and forget about it. And when I got to the end, again, I typed it up, looked at it, and went, this is much, much, much too long to ever be a picture book. It's a book. So in those cases, I was just wrong. Sometimes there are things where you sort of go, well, look, if it's in your head and it's got pictures in, it's probably not a novel. If the pictures actually move and make sounds, then maybe it's television or a movie. If you can keep them kind of static, then maybe it's going to be a comic. And sometimes I'll try something in several different ways. I'll have an idea that I know works, and I'll try it as a poem and watch it fail as a poem and go, okay, well, if you're not a poem, then maybe you're a short story, maybe you're a comic, whatever. And I'll come back and sometimes play with things in 2 or 3 different times until I feel like I've got it right.
I don't know if this is the Amanda version of that question, but it seems related, which is you've told the story on stage and off stage about writing the bed song and the process and sort of transformation that came at the end of making that song happen. Can you tell that story and talk about that a little bit, which seems to me also about where does the creativity take you?
Yeah, I mean, the bed song's interesting for me. I wish I'd played it for you guys because you'd have some context, but it's a solo piano song on the new record, and it's pretty simple to explain, actually. It's almost like a fictional narrative of a couple told in the first person, basically starting at the beginning of the relationship, and it chronicles with each verse like the way the beds change in the relationship. And it starts out and it's like this crazy couple, and at a party, sleeping in a sleeping bag at their friend's house, and through the shitty futon at college, and through getting married and getting a proper bed in a condo, and while this is all happening, the relationship's dying and coldening. I don't know, becoming more distant, and the bed just becomes this metaphor of space. And I don't usually write songs like that. I'm so impressed by Neil because he's such a great fiction thinker. And usually when I think about ideas and songs, it's always so personal. And and even my sort of fictional work in the past has always been like, some very, very close reflection of myself, but very close, so close that like you look at it and you see the ingredients and you see that it's not quite me, but it might as well be.
Close enough that your mother can get irritated.
Exactly. But the bed song, actually, I haven't experienced all of those stages. I've definitely been in relationships where things were, where distance happened. But this was like writing an epic poem of all painful relationships ever. And I was really proud of having written it because I was like, actually, I'm proud that it's a good song, but I'm actually proud that I managed to write a good work of fiction.
Which you also sort of webcast, Twitter cast the writing of, right?
Yeah, and that was, that's another thing about the song. So another thing that happened while writing the song, and I got the idea for the song probably a week or so before I wrote it. The idea popped in, and the idea of using the bed as a metaphor, and I thought, that'll be a great song. If I get that right, that'll be a great song. And I sat myself down at the piano one day to write it, And up until that point, I had had a real hang up about what it meant to be a good, disciplined creator, which is at the moment of creation and at the moment where I'm really going to sit down and write a song, I need to turn my phone off, not be distracted, shut my computer down, put all the shit away, and write, which is what real writers do. And I've been, and I have a huge Twitter following that I have a constant ongoing communication and relationship with. And just this time, I decided, fuck it. I'm going to actually, instead of closing down, I'm going to open up and I'm going to announce to my Twitter feed that I'm writing a song. And actually, by doing that, I feel like I'm going to have to be more disciplined because they're all going to kind of keep me on task. And they did. And it's not like I, set up a webcasting station at the piano and they didn't watch my process, but they knew. And they were there, and every 20 minutes or so, it probably took me 3 hours to write the song, and every 20 minutes or so, I'd take a picture of all my scratched out words and the piano. And my fan base is great that way. They were like a bunch of cheerleaders who were just sitting there on Twitter saying this sounds amazing. We're so glad you're writing. We can't wait to hear the song. And I realized I could do both, and I could tap into the enthusiasm of the internet without letting it destroy my creative process. And that was a huge revelation. And the song wound up being one of the best I'd ever written, I thought. And so I didn't take that lesson lightly.
So one more for each, and then we'll go to questions for you guys. So start organizing your thoughts. Inevitably, I must ask about the famous, infamous, celebrated, earth-shattering Kickstarter campaign, and all of the attention that it received, more so than anything else. That there was so much talk and so many responses from we have seen the future of the industry to she's a total hustler to every response you could have. From this vantage point now, what do you take as the biggest lessons from the $1 Million Kickstarter experience?
And
I don't need
postage.
Yeah, don't do free international postage. That's the big one. I learned so many things in so many departments, and I could talk about it for half an hour, so I won't. And I actually, my brain is sort of prepped on this. I was in Vienna last week and doing a kind of a panel like this on crowdfunding, and we got into really dark, interesting talks about social capital. A lot of the conversation lately that I've been involved in and wondering about, and what everyone's wondering about is, what if you're not like me? And, I can say it's the future of music, but it's my future. I'm good at this, and I'm good at communicating, and I like hanging out with my fans, and I love tweeting all day, and I love blogging, and I love using platforms like Kickstarter. That doesn't necessarily mean it's for everyone or for every project. And I think one of the biggest, not mistakes, but sort of misguided things maybe about the Kickstarter was that I drank the Kool-Aid that my Kickstarter success would translate into commercial success. And so I found myself thinking that in a weird way, I wish I had just taken my fan base for granted and done it with them instead of thinking that I could use them as a step to get to whatever that next magical place was. And I had actually, it's like I had already learned that lesson 6 times over with the record label. And I thought it was going to be different with Kickstarter, that every time I would walk into the office at Roadrunner Records, not very far from here, and now non-existent, but they would say, this is going to be the one, this is the moment, this is going to be the project that's going to actually bring you to the next place, which is the place you want to be. And I would go, oh, wow, great. And like an office of 30 people seemed to believe it, and seemed to believe that we should be putting our energy not into where we feel safe and into those we love, but into foreign structures so that we can like go out and conquer and be an imperial band. And actually, if I've learned any lesson, it's that even those closely around me, very well-intentioned, shouldn't be telling me what my instincts are, and I am very gullible. So that was the biggest one, because the Kickstarter, if I had just done the Kickstarter and delivered the record, and not kind of like also paid for giant videos and not paid for huge marketing campaigns and not tried to reach for the mainstream success that my team sort of all just flat assumed that the record would have, I think I would have been happier.
And richer.
And richer. Yeah, but richer, I don't really care about richer, but happier.
But there was all of those people who seemed to be assuming that you, having had the Kickstarter, you were now Uncle Scrooging. You had a swimming pool, it was filled with dollars, and you would take off all your clothes and plunge into it like a dolphin.
That's a wonderful image, Neil.
Maybe a song.
But yeah, it also and if nothing else, it also lifted the rug up on how amazed I was that really intelligent people didn't understand how business worked. Like, it really amazed me that smart journalists at smart magazines would be like, well, now that you have $1.2 million in the bank, what are you going to do? And I'd be like, have you seen the Kickstarter and the fact that I have to manufacture $800,000 worth of shit and mail it to people? And that it's a business? And that has brought up...
I love the guy on Reddit who asked, you say you spent over $100,000 manufacturing CDs, yet you only asked for $100,000 to start out with. How can you explain that? And I'm going, well, if only 3,000 people had signed up and she'd only had $100,000, then she wouldn't have had to manufacture. Well, and it was this sort of strange thing.
And I fielded a lot. And so the bigger question, and I'm about to write a book, and the book is going to be centered around these weird new questions that have come like flooding into my life, which is, why do people think art is so much different from running a business? And why is making a vinyl album in people's heads so much different than making an iPhone? And why do artists get shit for things that business people don't? And I can understand why. And artists are weird, and the way we feel about commerce over here, and just like, I will make you this thing and it costs $19.95, and the way people feel about paintings or music is definitely different. But watching them collide is fascinating.
And it's where the action is. I mean, that's where we're living right now, is in those questions. So, which brings me beautifully to the final question that I was going to ask Neil, and not hog the microphone. The other thing that came out this year was publication of the Make Great Art commencement lecture. Yes. So I'm curious. We have a room full here, maybe of artists, but maybe of technology visionaries and wizards, and whatever it is that they do within these walls. And I'm curious, without asking you to deliver a speech that will go viral around the world and cause people to quote from it on numerous occasions, how would you modify, or how would you modify the ideas that you spoke about in that celebrated speech for a room that's like this one?
I wouldn't. What was fascinating for me about that speech was I gave a commencement speech because I was asked to give a commencement speech. I'd never given one before. And every now and then I'd write it and I'd show it to Amanda and she'd read it through and she'd say, you can't say that. And I'd say, why not? She said, well, that's the kind of thing they say in commencement speeches. And I wouldn't know. So what I did was simply take everything I'd learned in 30 years of being a writer and stick it into a speech. It was like, that was easy. And there is a bit at the end where I started explaining that, what you do as an artist, because it was to the University of the Arts and a graduating class of artists, is you make good art. And that actually should be your response to all of the shit you're going to run into. Husband leaves you, make good art. House burns down, make good art. It's the something wonderful happens, make good art. That's what you do. And what I loved once it went out there and went viral, which is the kind of unpredictable thing that sometimes happens, and happens in this case, I'd see people on Twitter and on the web and in comments saying, well, I'm an architect. And actually, it works if you just cross out art and make architecture. And someone else is going, physics. You can make good physics. So speaking as the proud parent of somebody at Google who, when I say to him, Mike, explain to me what it is you're doing again. And he'll say, well, Dad, leaving aside all of the secrecy agreements, there are a few things I can tell you. And I say, okay, so tell me. And he'll go, right, so, what. It's like the adults in Charlie Brown. And after a while, he will realize that my eyes have completely glazed over. And I'll say, well, could you just give that to me in terms that I understand? He'll say, oh, Dad. Well, you know what a programming language is? And I say, well, yeah, I know what a programming language is. He says, well, what? So, I would, for this gathered audience, I would say make good what.
So if you guys have questions and want to go to the microphones, that's why they're there. In the meantime, just quickly because somebody will ask from the fans for the news hook, is what's latest on American Gods' progress with HBO, and in the last few hours, there's been lots of Sandman movie talk. So
American Gods is not going to be there. There is going to be a TV series. It's not going to be with HBO. I'm not yet at liberty to say where it is going to be, but it's awesome. I can say that. The Sandman movie rumors are Sandman movie rumors, and there was a saying when I grew up in Sussex, which you would occasionally hear old men say. Theoretically, old women could have said it too, but I never heard them. But I did actually hear our gardener say it. He said, I've lived too near the woods too long to be frightened by an owl. And Sandman is now in its 25th year, and rounds of internet rumors every couple of years. People say, Anne, what do you think of the new Sandman rumors? And it's like, yeah, they're Sandman rumors. But haven't you seen them? They're on the web. And I was like, yes, I've seen them and they're on the web. And, 18 months ago, it was definite that Eric Kripke's people were making the Sandman TV series. And it was definitely happening, except that it wasn't. As far as I can tell, watching this, loving the mechanics of an internet rumor, the incredibly tentative rumor that somebody nervously put up saying that they thought that maybe David Goyer was thinking about pitching a Sandman take to Warner's and had possibly spoken to or thought about Joseph Gordon-Levitt being in some way connected. Which, as far as I can tell, is actually what went up, has transmuted like this cosmic game of telephone into people on Twitter saying, well, what are you doing about the David Goyer, Joseph Gordon-Levitt movie? And I'm going, nothing, because it's all in your head. This is, I will believe a Sandman movie when I'm actually sitting in the audience eating popcorn. People saying things on the internet is lovely, but it's what they do on the internet.
Lovely or not. Yeah. All right. To this side, Rebecca.
Hi. I loved the Judy Blume song. That was awesome.
Thank you.
And I know there's lots of tired questions you guys get from doing interviews. Certainly none of them were today. Thank you for the awesome interview. Are there any subjects that you guys wish that people would ask you about?
I sometimes wish they'd ask more about the actual mechanics of writing. Because, there's all this stuff that I know and love. And most people don't come up and say, so let's talk about adverbs. Stephen King says you don't use adverbs, but I've read your stuff and you use adverbs all the time. What's with that? That kind of thing where you sort of feel like, oh, I can get into the mechanics of my craft. And nobody ever wants to know that. They just want to know who was the forgotten god in American Gods or whatever, which is a different kind of thing.
Yeah, mine's similar. I mean, especially given this last year, even when I would try to nudge journalists or interviewers towards you do know I made a record and we've spent 45 minutes talking about Kickstarter and I know you think it's fascinating and I find it fascinating and, but I really, especially in this day and age and being who I am, it does get painful to see the point, which is the music, getting obscured by the tech and the tools and the house around it. Because I'm really I'm much more proud of the record I made than I am of the Kickstarter. But people forget that because the Kickstarter is really big and shiny. And sometimes I wish that people would talk to me about actually what it's like to do this weird job that doesn't really have a name, that's like part artist, part traveling person, part talker to other people, part Twitter curator, part blogger. And the only person I actually get to talk about those details to is him. And I'm really lucky because we actually, even though he's a writer and I'm a musician, if you look at hours clocked and the stuff we do, we actually, the Venn diagram's we're very similar. But it's funny. Some of my favorite conversations lately have been with other artists or reading articles. Like I read an article in The Guardian by a young British musician who's in a band called Churches, and she was talking about how it feels to be backstage before a show on the toilet with your phone, crying, reading the comments under some article that she just wrote about how people are being sexist towards her band. And I was like, that's a very real moment that I recognize, which is that artists are now having to do jobs and communicate in ways and deal with stuff they didn't used to. And that in itself isn't really discussed, how we juggle that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's interesting stuff to talk about. And usually it doesn't get that deep.
It's a remarkable piece, that Church's piece, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go to this side.
A question for both, actually. First, a comment with the Sandman movie. I remember a number of years ago, you actually...
They're off.
Huh? Oh, no. You actually made the comment on stage when someone asked you about it, used the words, you don't want to be the one boiling your own baby.
Barbecuing.
Barbecuing.
I said I don't want to barbecue my own baby. I remember that, yes.
So I just want to say I've been reading your work for like 20 years now, and it's still wonderful and amazing, and even when I go back. That said, I tried to sell a book to everybody who reads your work, and I was wondering if you might be able to pitch it as well. Why should people read Gene Wolfe's piece?
Why should people read Gene Wolfe's piece? Because it is smarter and trickier than they are. Peace is a beautiful novel by Gene Wolfe, who I think is one of the greatest living American novelists, probably one of the greatest living human novelists. And Peace is an early book of his, and it's a book which the first time I read it, I read as a beautiful, bucolic set of memoirs, heartwarming and sweet. And then I went back to a few years later and suddenly went, this is not that book. I completely misread it. There is a dark, evil, very, very nasty book hiding inside this book. That is so cool. And the trouble is you don't want to say any more than that because you don't want to give too much away. You just want to say, read it. And trust me.
Yeah.
And it's tricky and it's nasty.
I don't think there's any book that I've ever read and then immediately reread because they're just like, oh, wait. Yes. And then for Amanda, my wife, who is also attended Wesleyan, is an artist and does kind of a lot of design and art related stuff to pay the bills, but she feels weird about that, especially since she can't it's hard to tell people what she does anyway. But she specifically wanted me to ask you when she should be expecting the fraud police to show up, because she's been expecting them for a while now.
Yeah, so he's referencing something that I gave a commencement speech the graduation year before Neil did, and I talked about the fraud police, which is this phenomenon that I think it was actually a friend of mine and I came up with the term, but it was that idea that there really are people who are going to come knocking on your door in the middle of the night saying, we know you don't know what the fuck you're doing. We're here to take you away. That job...
In my head, they always were going to knock on my door and say, you're going to have to get a real job now. And I would go quietly and get a real job.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny in talking about all of this stuff about like art and business. You know, the idea that artists have of themselves is usually so fucked up because of the main cultural idea that everyone has of artists, and also in a weird, not to get too meta, but the way that everyone thinks that artists have this passionate relationship with their art, or this total purity, or this pick an adjective, and it's been great for me now as like an artist. Like, I'm like going on 40, and there are as many kinds of artists as there are people. They're just as insecure. They're just as good at or bad at business, good at or bad at communicating. And sure, like there are some things about artists that you can see that are similar. But it was incredibly liberating for me, like in my late 20s, to go like, oh, I don't have to act like this just because I'm an artist. I don't have to think about myself this way or about my work or about my life. And like that bed song thing is a perfect example. I realized I had kind of been buying into the idea that like, artists do this, and like I'm up in the garret with my wine and my cigarettes creating my, and actually it's not like that. It's work like anything else. Like you sit your ass down and you do it, and it's not romantic, and it's not necessarily fun, and you might not even feel passionate about it. And so, if you can, once you can do enough work on yourself as a human in the forgiveness department, that you're not fitting the picture that you had, the fraud police just, you still kind of, you still always fear that, I think, in a little way. But the more you work and the more other people take you seriously, the easier it gets.
I was actually in the audience at her commencement speech, and I misheard her. And I went through the entirety of her speech thinking she was talking about the frog police. Which were still doing the same thing that the fraud police did. They were just these 6-foot-high frogs who
came to you, who knocked on your door in the middle of the night telling you that you had to get a real fucking job.
You would listen to them. All right, I hate to do it. I got the signal saying I can take one more question, so that would come back to this side. So sorry to the other guys.
So let's talk about adverbs. No,
Shit.
seriously, not really. So Neil, you write a lot of imaginative, really interesting worlds and settings, but you rarely reuse them or come back to them. Do you ever miss the worlds that you created and wish you could come back to them? And what specific settings do you miss the most?
Absolutely, I do. People think that I have some kind of weird moral high ground, and that I'm not the kind of writer who does sequels. And the truth is, I'm always the kind of writer who plans to do sequels and would love to go back. I just get sort of, if on the one hand I have the choice between something that I've done and I know how to do it and I can do it well, and it now has an audience who are waiting for more, and a publisher who will give me more money to do it. And on the other hand, I have something that I have no idea if anybody wants, that I don't know how to do. I will always go, oh, shiny. And that's what I do. Recently, the BBC Radio, did an audio adaptation of Neverwhere on BBC Radio 4. And I got to act in it, which was amazing. Much more amazing than that was that James McAvoy, Natalie Dormer, Sir Christopher Lee, Bernard Cribbins, Anthony Stewart Head. And the cast list is just a who's who of amazing actors, and it goes on and on and on. And all of these people were in it. And I got to listen to it when they'd finished it. And I listened to the whole, 6 hours of BBC Neverwhere. And I'm like, this is great. Why isn't there any more of this? And then I thought, it's because I never did any more. So I went and dug out the first page of a short story called How the Marquis Got His Coat Back that I started in 2002 and abandoned. Not because it was bad, but because I was writing it in a notebook that a fan had given me with rose petals bound into the paper. And I discovered that if you have rose petals bound into the paper, they clog your pen. So I'd written a page and a half and put it away. It's true. And so I finished that story. And it's, 10, 11,000 words long. And I gave it to George R.R. Martin and Gardner Dozois for an anthology called Rogues, which will be coming out next September. And having done that, I went, hang on, I had an entire Neverwhere novel plotted. I just never quite got round to it. I should definitely do that. So I really should. It's honestly not because I don't mean to. It's just I get distracted.
Ladies and gentlemen of Google, thank you for your time. Everybody have a lovely weekend.
So
Neil Gaiman, Amanda Palmer.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alan.